Ladies and gentlemen, you are now entering the Decent Christian Talk podcast. Enjoy.
Well, we are here. It's finally March. We've gone through the winter. Actually, it hasn't been that bad of a winter where I live. But for those of you that like spring, like myself, I'm sure you are very excited to look ahead to spring. It's going to be a long summer, though, where we live. It's that 17-year locust thing. So I'm not so sure about that. But anyway, before we get started here today, pleased to announce that DecentChristianTalk.com, which of course we are affiliated with, we are partnering with a local festival here in north central West Virginia called Soul Fuel. There's been a few artists announced for it so far, like Colton Dixon, David Crowder, and Trip Lee. So it should be a fun time. It's July 22nd, that weekend, and 23rd. Really, if you guys are in the area, you should come check that out in the north central West Virginia area. Might be worth the trip. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, you might want to drive down. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get to hang out with some of our favorite artists, and it's just going to be a fun time. So we're definitely looking forward to that. We're glad to announce that to you guys. Again, we would encourage you to subscribe to this podcast, as well as giving us a nice review on iTunes. That would really help us out, help us get the word around. If you haven't already, like us on Facebook, facebook.com/DecentChristianTalk, as well as following us on Twitter, DC Talk Act 2. And of course, you need to subscribe to DecentChristianTalk.com so you can get all the updates that we do emailed directly to your email account. That helps us keep connected with you. We are excited about what's coming ahead for us this coming year, but right now, we're going to go to the Decent Christian Talk podcast number 10.
All right, hit that horn, babe. Let's dance. Jumped out the whip. And I jumped out the whip.
Well, we hope you're doing well. It is March. Just starting out the month of madness that we know is March. We're very excited about what's already happened this year. I mean, it's been a pretty hectic year so far. Man alive, I mean, we've just got to start out right off the bat, coming out of the gate. You know, we're recording this on March the 4th, Friday, March the 4th. Man, I was getting ready to go to bed last night, and I'm checking the Twitter feed, and I see this Billy Graham account tweeting about Michael Tate talking about DC Talk. And I went ahead and I followed the link. And it was like a 12 or 13 minute podcast. So I kind of decided to turn that on before I went to sleep. And, you know, especially because, you know, the Newsboys, they released their album this weekend. So I was excited to hear what he had to say. And kind of right at the end, he kind of snuck something in. And he kind of brought up DC Talk. And, you know, we all love DC Talk. They're the reason why we started our website, DecentChristianTalk.com. But, yeah, he kind of just offered it up. Hey, I'll just read the quote. We're looking at doing a few shows. DC Talk will live again. I mean, he kind of just threw that out. And it was hard for me to go to sleep after that because, as you guys probably know, here at DecentChristianTalk.com and here on the Decent Christian Talk podcast, we are such big DC Talk fans. And, I thought this was interesting that he said this right before, this podcast released the day before the Newsboys record came out. And so I thought it was interesting, the timing of that, because that's not something you really announce before your band releases a new record. So, I guess I was a little bit skeptical about it, but I think there might be something to this, quite honestly. And I know a lot of times when it comes to DC Talk, it's kind of like the boy that cried wolf. Every time one of the members kind of hints at a reunion, time goes by and nothing ever happens. And it's been like that ever since the solo and intermission projects. And, that I think the solo projects came out in 2000, and then the initial solo albums themselves came out in 2001. And kind of ever since then, it's been like every year or two we'll get something like this. But the reason why I think there's something to this is, quite simply, Toby last year, he put DC Talk on a song. And that's the first time that they've appeared on a song together since the song on Kevin Max's The Blood record. It had been some time. It had been about 7 or 8 years. And I honestly don't know any inside information or anything like that. But I think that, that was kind of Toby's way of putting out feelers. That was his way of seeing if there was still a buzz there. Because, when you haven't been around as a group of DC Talk as a group, because you haven't been around for so long, you probably start to wonder, really, is there still something there? And I think that was his way of trying to find that out. And I think overwhelmingly the response has been positive to the song that Toby released. He did a nice, for those of you that checked out that This Is Not a Test tour, or for those of you that are checking out his tour now, he kind of does a kind of DC Talk tribute / a cool little thing that they do with the technology and the screens, and it's a pretty cool experience for those of you that have seen that. But again, I think that was his way of seeing if there's something there. And then you have this quote with Michael saying that we're looking at doing a few shows. DC Talk will live again. He not really being solicited for his opinion on DC Talk. He kind of just offered that. You can listen to the podcast for yourself from Billy Graham. But pretty cut and dry, if you ask me, that there's probably something in the water there. Another unique dynamic about this, and this is kind of the first time that this has happened since 2001, all 3 members have released or are going to be releasing records kind of close to each other. Before it seemed like they were kind of staggered, and so there wasn't Toby might be getting ready to go off the road and take a little break before going back into the studio, but the Newsboys were just putting out an album. Or, the same thing with Kevin. It just kind of seemed that the releases were staggered. Now you have Toby, who just released This Is Not a Test last fall. The Newsboys just released Love Riot today, and Kevin Max, of course, is releasing a record pretty soon. He's doing another Pledge Music campaign that's supposed to kick off any day now. So we got all 3 members of DC Talk releasing a record in close time to each other. So I'm just wondering if this whole timing thing that we've always heard about, we always hear about the DC Talk guys always trying to get it timed right. I wonder if it is finally happening. Selfishly, I hope it is. I love what all three of those guys are doing. I really do. But as you all know, there's just something about when those three guys hit the stage together. They're untouchable. They just are. That's just when they were on stage together inducting Guido into the GMA Hall of Fame. Even just them on stage talking, there was just a presence about them. It's just unexplainable. Those guys are just so dynamic together. So I'm excited to see if anything actually comes of this. I might just be throwing darts at absolutely nothing. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have any inside information. But, hey, it's fun to speculate. That's why we do what we do. Anyway, moving on. We can look at some of the releases that have happened. And like I mentioned, the Newsboys just released Love Right. You guys can check that out. There's a couple releases that have already happened this year. And we can highlight a few of those. Of course, one of my favorites, Lecrae, released Church Clothes 3. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to say that I did not like Anomaly, because I did. But there was a track or two or three that just didn't hold up well for me. It wasn't the most complete record to me. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. There were some tracks on there that were as strong as ever for Lecrae. But I kind of, I don't know if I hold him to an unfair standard. But having said all that, Lecrae released Church Clothes 3 basically out of nowhere. He announced it, I think, Wednesday night, and maybe released it the next day or something along those lines. He released it on a Thursday, and man, every one of these songs just hit me right in between the eyes. Man, if you guys have not heard this album, you have to check it out. He talks about so many key issues. Man, you've got to check it out. He did a few collaborations on this record. A few notable ones are with Propaganda and KB, along with John Gibbs, Jay Givens, Jackie Hill Perry, a lot of people. So definitely check that out. He's on tour right now. It's like a college-type tour. He's hitting a lot of campuses around the country. So if he comes around your area, you've got to check that out. I'm sure he's got some of the Church Clothes 3 songs on the set list. And another hip-hop guy that released a record just today. It's not a full-length one. It's just an EP. Is Tadashi. He's one of our favorites here at Decent Christian Talk. We got to interview that guy last summer, and he is just one of those guys that just, man, he pours his heart out. He released an EP called This Time Around, and man, every one of these songs he just made so personal. So you've got to check that out. Couple other releases this year. Anchor and Braille. If you have never heard of Anchor and Braille, you might not have. But they released a record called Songs for the Late Night Drive Home. If you liked Amberlin, you might like Anchor and Braille, because the lead vocalist of Amberlin, Stephen Christian, is the lead vocalist of Anchor and Braille. So if you're missing Amberlin, it's been a couple years since they broke up, check out Anchor and Braille. There's a couple notable songs. Watch You Burn, they released as a single. It's really good. I think they also released a lyric video for that on YouTube. You definitely guys want to check that out. Another EP kind of released, not necessarily out of nowhere. He had a Kickstarter for it, but the release just came pretty quickly. It was the Steve Taylor and the Danielson foil. Just a lot of fun, let me tell you that. I don't want to say I enjoyed this as much as Goliath, because I didn't. I enjoyed Goliath a little bit more, But nonetheless, this is a fun record. It's probably not for everyone because of the Danielson element. His vocals are not for everybody, but I will say that they're not as featured as some might fear. And I'll admit he's not my favorite artist, but he's not on the record so much that I can't listen to this album. It's definitely worth checking out. And Steve Taylor also, he just recorded a live album for the Kickstart. I hopefully he releases that as well to the mainstream public, so you guys can check that out. I think it'll be called Live to the Deadness. But we talked about Anchor and Braille featuring somebody from another band. We're going to talk about another band called Army of Bones. Man alive, you guys have to check this band out, Army of Bones. If you liked Delirious, Martin Smith from Delirious is the new lead vocalist for this band, Army of Bones. And this is kind of, if you listen to Delirious, a lot of times you think about their worship sound. For the die-hard Delirious fans, they know that Delirious was not just a worship band, they were a rock band. They had a couple records that were just pure rock. That's what this band is more geared towards. It's just a phenomenal sound. They've released 2 songs called Batteries and one called River. Both songs are absolutely phenomenal. You have to check this band out. I'm excited to hear more from them in the coming year. Urban Rescue, who is on tour with Ren Collective right now, released an EP called Wild Heart. It's kind of it's got an electronic feel to it, which I love. So you guys have to check that out. They're definitely a worship experience, but they're also they're not the typical one you would think of. Think about Hillsong Young and Free, kind of in that vein. And speaking of them, they also released a record, long-awaited record, and I love that album to death. I think it's a really good album. It's called Youth Revival. I was very excited that they decided to do a live record instead of a studio record. I just think the worship songs translate better when they're live. That's just one thing that I prefer. I don't know. I know that's not the same preference for everybody, but nonetheless, it was definitely an album that I liked. Main Alive, one band that just came out of nowhere. Sanctus Real announced that they have a new lead vocalist, and they just released an EP called This Is Love. And it's really kind of a new sound for them. It's kind of a sound, if you heard the new Mumford & Sons record last year, it's kind of like that sound. So if you liked that, I hate saying, if you like Mumford & Sons, check this band out. But just comparing the two, I'm just trying to describe their sound, and it's a good sound, if you ask me. But anyway, if you haven't heard this yet, I would definitely encourage you to check that out. It's definitely exciting to hear a new chapter. Kind of get skeptical when you hear things like that. But I will say that this is definitely something worth checking out. Let's see if I've missed any releases this year. I know Showbread, they put out their last release. It's kind of not something that is my favorite, but if you're into the hard stuff, you might want to check that out. Jesus Culture also released a live record called Let It Echo. There's a couple tracks on there that are definitely worth checking out. And let's see. There's a few other ones. Rival Choir, which we got to interview, released a record called I Believe, Help My Unbelief. So definitely check that out. Check out our interview on decentchristiantalk.com. Also a new release from Audrey Assad, who we also got to interview. She released a record called Inheritance, which is a collection of hymns, which she kind of grew up with, and it's kind of a, I think she did a Kickstarter for this, so this is one of those type of deals. There's a lot of really good takes on some hymns that I haven't heard of for a long, long time, since I was young. So that was really cool to get to listen to. And I have to do this. I have to mention Lacey Sturm released a record called Life Screams. If you loved her back in the day in Flyleaf, especially that first record that they released, which was just a dynamic album, man, you've got to check that out. It's really good. Not always a fan of that type of music, but this record was really good for me. So definitely check that out. So if we're going to look ahead a little bit, of course I mentioned before, Kevin Max has a new record coming out called Playing Games with the Shadow. Pledge Music campaign is going to be coming out. He's got some, from what I've heard, there's going to be a lot of really cool ways that you can get involved with that. So definitely stay tuned to his Twitter feed at Kevin Max for more details, and I'm sure he'll be able to update you on that. Dustin Kensrue is putting out a record this month called Thoughts That Float on a Different Blood. And I've heard some of the singles off that, and man alive, they're very good. There's a single that he released called Jesus Christ that is just such an interesting take on that. Definitely, I'm looking forward to this. And also, I've heard rumors that Dustin's old band Thrice might be coming back. So that's definitely going to be interesting. I hope that they tour around this area, because I never really got a chance to see them live. A couple other releases worth noting. A band called Consumed by Fire is making their In Pop Records full-length record debut. We just featured them in an interview this past week. It's a band full of three brothers who grew up as pastors' kids. They have an interesting story. You might want to check that interview out. If you go to decentchristiantalk.com, not only is there an interview, but there's also a link to a sampler on Noise Trade. So if you want to check them out, that's a cool way to do that. So anyway, yeah, that seems to be it as far as music is concerned. A couple other things worth noting. There was a film released this past month called Risen. I've not gotten a chance to see this film, but I've not heard one bad thing said about it. And I definitely have plans to check this out soon, especially with Easter coming up this month. Definitely excited to check this out. And I'm interested in the perspective that they are giving out from the perspective of the soldier. I think that's a great idea, and I'm excited to look forward to that. But anyway, that's about it here for the Decent Christian Talk podcast. I hope you enjoyed your time here, and God bless.
Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses. Thanks.